Beginning my day with a Bible devotional has absolutely been the best thing I could have ever done for myself.
My time in the Old Testament only proves to me again and again and again that the heart of man is deceitfully wicked above all things. When I'm reading the New Testament, I read it within the context of when Jesus said, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." Everything in the New Testament is just an expansion of one of those two thoughts.
Those are the two lenses I look through when I'm reading the Old or the New Testament. So get a cup of coffee, sit back, and join me as I think with my mouth open. Greetings and salutations. Welcome to another fabulous day in the Lord's neighborhood and to another episode of Coffee, the Bible, and Page, the place where I read a chapter from the Bible and I think with my mouth open. In the beginning, coffee, and lo, it was very good. Well, today we are going to start our journey with David as he prepares to become king. Saul has been killed. Saul has fallen in battle. Jonathan has fallen in battle. And David is back home, and he demonstrates something really, really, really amazing. If you followed along this far, you know that Saul made himself the mortal enemy of David, tried to kill him on more than one occasion. Saul knew that God was going to hand his kingdom over to David and that Saul's lineage would not last and that David was going to be the future king of Israel, just like Samuel had prophesied and told him. And Saul spent a good deal of his kingship chasing down David and trying to kill him. And yet, David displays something really amazing in this chapter. So, having said that, let's just get started. This is chapter 1 of 2 Samuel. After the death of Saul, David returned from striking down the Amalekites and stayed in Ziklag 2 days. Now, you have to realize, chapter 30, this is where David avenged the sacking of Ziklag by the Amalekites and went and rescued his and his men's families. And Saul's final battle with the Philistines in chapter 31, those happened concurrently. All right, so David's come back after striking down the Amalekites, and he was in Ziklag for a couple days. And on the third day, a man arrived from Saul's camp with his clothes torn and dust on his head, and when he came to David, he fell to the ground to pay him honor. "Where have you come from?" David asked him. He answered, "I have escaped from the Israelite camp." He escaped from the Israelite camp. That means he wasn't there on behalf of the Israelites. He escaped from the camp. Now, did he escape from the Philistines or did he escape from Israel? Whatever, it sounds like he wasn't there on behalf of the Israelites. He escaped from the Israelite camp. "What happened?" David asked. "Tell me." "The men fled from battle," he replied. "Many of them fell and died, and Saul and his son Jonathan are dead." Then David said to the young man who brought him the report, "How do you know that Saul and his son Jonathan are dead?" "I happened to be in Mount Gilboa," the young man said, "and there was Saul leaning on his spear, with the chariots and their drivers in hot pursuit." In other words, the chariots were coming, and chariots traditionally held archers. And if you remember the tale of Saul's battle, he was grievously, mortally wounded by archers. When he turned around and saw me, he called out to me and I said, "What can I do?" He asked me, "Who are you?" "An Amalekite," I answered. Then he said to me, "Stand here by me and kill me. I'm in the throes of death, but I'm still alive." So I stood beside him and I killed him because I knew that after he had fallen, he could not survive. And I took the crown that was on his head and the band on his arm and I brought them here to my Lord. Now, we read in the previous chapter where Saul had fallen on his own sword, tried to get his servant to kill him and wouldn't. and he fell on his own sword. And yet here's an Amalekite saying, oh, I killed him. Depending on which story you believe, each one carries with it its own conclusions. I tend to believe that Saul committed suicide in the previous chapter. But this guy was trying to curry favor with David. And he thought, if I bring him proof of the death of the man who had tormented him and chased him, that he would come into David's good graces. So I think the Amalekite's lying. He must have come upon the body of Saul after Saul had died and did what he did. He took the crown and he took the armband to bring back to David to, I don't know, maybe he was hoping to get rewarded for his acts. Then David and all the men with him took hold of their clothes and tore them. They mourned and wept and fasted till evening for Saul and his son Jonathan, and for the army of the Lord and for the nation of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. David said to the young man who brought him the report, where are you from? Oh, I'm the son of a foreigner, an Amalekite, he answered. And then I can almost hear the tenor in David's voice change when he says, why weren't you afraid to lift your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed? The Amalekite, with this lie that he told, and I believe he was lying, signed his own death warrant by claiming to be the one who killed Saul, the king of Israel. Then David called one of his men and said, go strike him down. So he struck him down, and he died. For David had said to him, your blood be on your own head. Your own mouth testified against you when you said, I killed the Lord's anointed. Now, David would be angry if this man had genuinely killed Saul. David could be angry for that. Or David possibly was angry because this guy tried to take advantage of the death of the king of Israel, making some kind of coin off of it. I don't know. I tend to think that's what happened, that this Amalekite was trying to take advantage of his situation, get in David's good graces, and David was probably as appalled by that as he might be for any other reason. David then composed a song, a lament, for Saul and Jonathan. David took up this lament concerning Saul and his son Jonathan, and he ordered that the people of Judah be taught this lament of the bow. It is written in the book of Jasher. That's a book that's no longer around, that nobody's found yet. And he taught it to Judah. Now, the only reason I can think of it says he taught it to Judah is because he had been currying the favor of Judah when he was supposedly a vassal of King Achish from the Philistines. King Achish thought he was defending Philistines against the Philistine enemies, but in reality, David was pursuing and killing off the enemies of Judah and currying favor with the tribe of Judah. All right, so this is a song that he ordered Judah to learn. A gazelle lies slain on your heights, Israel. How the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath, proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon, lest the daughters of the Philistines be glad, and lest the daughters of the uncircumcised rejoice. Gath and Ashkelon, they're in part of Philistia. Now, the word proclaim says, proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon. The word proclaim is generally a word used for good news. So he's saying, let's not let this get back to Ashkelon and Gath so that those citizens can party. He said, this is not good news. So proclaim it not. Don't treat it like it's good news. Mountains of Gilboa, may you have neither dew nor rain. May no showers fall in your terraced field, for there the shield of the mighty was despised, the shield of Saul, no longer rubbed with oil. Now it's interesting. It was customary to condition and preserve leather shields by rubbing them with oil. So this could be just a reference of Saul's shield left behind in the battlefield. It may be more than coincidental that the particular wording is associated with royalty. In other words, shield sometimes refers to royalty. You're my shield is another way of saying you're my king. You're my sovereign. You're my protector. You're my shield. If you look at it from that perspective, then what David is saying here is sovereign Saul, no longer anointed with oil. In other words, he's not alive. He's not with us anymore. For there the shield of the mighty was despised. Sovereign Saul, no longer rubbed with oil. From the blood of the slain, from the flesh of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan did not turn back. The sword of Saul did not return unsatisfied. And Saul and Jonathan, in life they were loved and admired, and in death they were not parted. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. Wow. Now, the Hebrew word order in this verse 23, talking about how Jonathan and Saul were inseparable in life and in death. Jonathan, yes, he loved David, and he recognized that David was the next king. But Jonathan was a man of character, and he stood by his father. Even though he recognized what his father was doing was wrong, he stood by his father even until death. That speaks so much to the character of Jonathan. And you can understand why David would want to honor Jonathan. Daughters of Israel, weep for Saul, who clothed you in scarlet and finery, who adorned your garments with ornaments of gold. How the mighty have fallen in battle. Jonathan lay slain on your heights. I grieve for you, Jonathan. My brother, you were very dear to me. Your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of women. Now, it should be understood that he's talking about the camaraderie of brotherhood with Jonathan, that their tie was as close as if they were physically related. And he recognized that Jonathan's love for David and his loyalty to David was an amazing thing, a powerful thing. David has lost perhaps the closest and truest friend he's ever had. All of us can relate to that. It's never easy to lose someone that you love. I've lost family members, but I've also lost people who were incredibly close to me. And I don't know why that hurts more. I don't know why. I can't understand it. I just know that when someone who has voluntarily come into my life and stuck around and become a brother or a sister and a friend, there's a bond there that sometimes supersedes that of blood family. I mean, I love my family. I had 2 brothers and a sister. I loved them. But I've had a couple friends throughout my life that have been closer to me. It's like family, your blood family has no choice but to be your family. But like with Jonathan and David, Jonathan chose to treat David as if he were a blood-related brother. That's a choice on Jonathan's part, and that's a precious thing. That's a precious gift. When you choose to be someone's friend, closer than a brother. So David is saying your love for me was more wonderful than that of women. David chose to love Jonathan, and Jonathan chose to love David. There's a bond there that is powerful. How the mighty have fallen. He closes it off. The weapons of war have perished. It's like he's saying this is the end of an era. This is the end of an epic time in Israel's history. David's lament for Saul and Jonathan is characterized by passion and restraint, while giving full vent to his feelings on hearing the report of their death. This is important. David displays no bitterness toward his mortal enemy Saul. Let there be no doubt, Saul was David's enemy. But from David's perspective, whether or not Saul was his enemy or not, God chose Saul to be king of Israel. And David ascribes honor to that, to the point where he wouldn't harm Saul. He had opportunity to hurt Saul and maybe even kill Saul, and he didn't. David's view of the sovereignty of God superseded any desire on his part for retribution or revenge, even to the point he would not fight back with Saul. He fled from Saul. He deliberately did not fight with Saul, and he could have on several occasions. And David was a masterful general. There's a good chance that he could have defeated Saul on several occasions. But this is the point of this chapter that God drove home to me. David is displaying an incredible ability to forgive. David was wronged. He was anointed to be future king of Israel, and the current king of Israel tried to kill him on several occasions. The current king of Israel took David's wife away from him and gave her to another man. David and Michal, Saul's daughter, they were never divorced. When David went on the run, Saul just gave his wife to another man to be his wife. David forgave him. There's nothing in this song that he writes that has anything but praise and honor for Saul. There's no evidence of bitterness. There's no evidence of unforgiveness, when he had every right to be justified in anger, and there's no sense of celebration here that the king who sought David's life is dead. This is the act of total, complete forgiveness. Biblical forgiveness is tied to the concept of debt repayment. And that's the concept of forgiveness. If you owe me money and I forgive you that debt, then from this point on, you owe me nothing. That's what forgiveness means. When someone owes you something and you forgive that debt, you're saying from this moment on, you owe me nothing. And life goes on as if you owe him nothing or he owes you nothing. That's what forgiveness is. When Paul tells us that the wages of sin is death, in other words, the sin in your life requires a price to be paid. And the price is death. Death is separation. Physical death is separation from the soul from the body. Because of sin and what's going on in the world, eventually these bodies die and our soul is separated from our body. That's death. But then there's a separation from God, a spiritual death. Paul says the wages of sin is death, separation from God. But the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ. If you are a follower of Christ, a Christ follower, then your debt of sin has been forgiven. In other words, there's a moment in time from which, moving forward, it's as if that sin no longer existed. The penalty for your sin is death. God has paid off your penalty. He's forgiven us. David forgave Saul. If you truly believe in the sovereignty of God, then you have to embrace this concept of forgiveness. Because in the eternal scheme of things, whatever's done to you means next to nothing. Let's say you have the ability to live 1,000 years from now for 1,000 more years. And somebody does something harmful to you today. They malign your name, your reputation. Maybe they actually steal from you physically. 1,000 years from now, will that matter? No. 100 years from now, it won't matter. If it won't matter 100 years from now, why should it matter 5 minutes from now? When someone harms you, the most noble thing you can do is forgive them. Jesus did on the cross. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He's asking God, forgive them. David forgave Saul. There's nothing in here that talks about David and Saul being enemies in this song. In fact, the fact that he kills the Amalekite, who claimed to have killed Saul, tells you that David actually was honoring Saul as if Saul had never tried to kill him, because David forgave him. There's no bitterness in David towards Saul. You know, I'll close with this story. Years ago, my father passed away in 2002, I think. And within the next 5 to 8 years or so, my older brother died and my mother died. And we had promised Mom and Dad, my younger brother Pat and I, we had promised them that we would take their ashes back to Alaska, do a very special place for our family, and scatter their ashes. And we're flying back home. And my brother and I were talking and on the plane, and he said, I always wonder why you almost never come back to Sitka, my hometown in Alaska. And I said, yeah, I don't have a lot of great memories there. And, Pat, I was bullied in school a lot. And I just don't have any reason to go back. I said, and Pat said, he said something that was so wise and on point. He said, Paige, you're the one person in our family, you're the one truly religious person in our family. And you say you follow the one who forgave everything. And you can't forgive half a dozen idiots who did something that they're probably not even thinking about anymore. You claim to follow the one who forgave so much, and yet you seem to forgive so little. And he wasn't being angry with me when he said it. He was truly puzzled. And that was some of the wisest words I'd ever heard in my life. And it woke me up. I made up my mind. From this point on, it's as if that stuff never happened to me. They're released from their debt. I don't want payment. I don't want them to say that. I don't care if they ever say they're sorry. I don't care for any kind of repayment. I am forgiving them their debt. Because, see, there was a part of me that was hurt that kind of demanded some kind of compensation for the damage they'd done to me. And there was damage done. But the truth of it is, by forgiving them, I was freed from that burden I was carrying. And there was no longer bitterness. There's no longer any rage. There's no longer any anger towards what had happened to me as a child. Because you know what? 60 years later, it doesn't mean anything. David forgave Saul. This is a huge lesson in forgiveness in this chapter. I think that's a good place to stop, don't you? So I will. And Paige, here's my coffee. And lo, it's still very good. And I'm out of here. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
So, what did you think about today's Bible devotional? Email me and let me know your thoughts at ffog@me.com.